Senator Coyle.
Honourable colleagues, I rise today in this chamber on the lands of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people to support what I hope will be the swift passage of Bill C-41. This important bill is urgently needed to enable our world-class Canadian humanitarian organizations to do what they do best: efficiently, effectively, and compassionately bring the basic necessities of life, water, food, and health services to people, young and old, no matter where they live, and without fear of criminal prosecution for these historic organizations. It's bad enough that the people these organizations serve and partner with live in fear, and that their frontline staff face dangers. But our Canadian humanitarian organizations should not have to fear criminal prosecution in Canada simply because the people they are serving are living in places where a terrorist organization, such as the Taliban in Afghanistan, is in control. As you heard Senator Omar describe in wonderful detail, very clearly, this bill provides a legislative solution by amending Canada's criminal code to enable the delivery of international assistance in areas controlled by terrorist groups. Colleagues, this is the logical thing to do, and colleagues, it is the right thing to do. Honourable colleagues, I intend to speak very briefly, as you can see. I felt compelled to share just one important perspective on this with you. In my first speech in this chamber, I introduced those of you who were here 5 years ago to people who have influenced me along my pathway in life. And allow me to cite a very short paragraph from that speech where I introduce one such person. And I quote from that speech: "Recently returned to Kabul from her refugee experience in Iran, Bibi Gul is an Afghan widow with a dependent son. I met Bibi up on the Kabul mountainside, where she had quite literally carved out her home by hand, spoon, knife, whatever simple implement she could find, from the rock face of that mountainside. She was making a living by embroidering badges for police forces and other officials. She was using microloans to purchase the equipment she needed for her trade and the specialized threads she imported from Iran. Bibi had incredible drive and was proud of the home and business she had created." End of quote. I learned a lot from Bibi Gul about the power of human ingenuity, and I think of her today and wonder how she and her son are doing in this new reality under the Taliban, whose terror she and her family had previously fled Afghanistan in the 1990s. Bibi Gul was able to access those essential small amounts of capital from one of the many microfinance organizations supported through MISFA, the Microfinance Investment Support Facility for Afghanistan. MISFA was established to provide access to loans and other financial services to hundreds of thousands of people like Bibi so they could earn a living. MISFA was also committed to building a strong and sustainable microfinance sector for Afghanistan to coordinate international donor contributions and ultimately to build the Afghan economy as an essential component of establishing a new, stable, and resilient Afghan democracy. In 2007, our colleague, Senator Werner, then the minister responsible for Canadian International Development Agency, announced a Canadian contribution of $16 million for the Afghan microfinance facility. Her cabinet colleague, Minister Peter MacKay at the time, asked me to join the board of MISFA to represent Canada and other international donors in Afghanistan. From 2007 to 2010, I traveled regularly to Afghanistan for board meetings and site visits, like the one I did to Bibi's home-based business on the Kabul mountainside. The year after I completed my service to Afghanistan, our colleague, Senator Patterson, was posted to that country by the Canadian Armed Forces. Since the early 1960s, Canada has provided humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan, initially in response to natural disasters. We've had diplomatic relationships with the country since 1968 and established our embassy in Kabul in 2003. which was closed, as we know, in August 2021 following the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. From 2001 to 2021, Canada provided $3.9 billion in international assistance to Afghanistan. And colleagues, we know that 40,000 Canadian soldiers courageously served as part of the NATO forces there, with 158 of whom, including Captain Nicola Goddard from my hometown, and one diplomat losing their lives there. With Canada's support, along with other international partners, Afghanistan, with its many dedicated and capable government and civil society leaders, made significant gains in women's rights, education, economic advancement, including at the grassroots level where Bibi and frankly most Afghans exist, in health, in peace and security, and the early, very delicate stages of building a stable democracy. Colleagues, these were hard-fought gains, and the situation was always precarious in Afghanistan. Honestly, even just going to Kabul for board meetings was at times frightening for me because of the instability at that time, including random bombings taking place and often in places I had just been. Colleagues, quite frankly, after all that effort, investment, and hope, the current situation in Afghanistan is heartbreaking. At the initial briefing on Bill C-41, we heard from representatives of the Canadian Humanitarian Coalition and the Aid for Afghanistan Coalition that our colleague Senator Omidvar just spoke to. One of the Canadian civil society leaders there said something which I found to be profound and highly relevant to this discussion and to Canada's engagement with the people of Afghanistan. And that person said, and I quote, "Healthy, well-fed people are a prerequisite to the necessary political pathway for Afghanistan." Obvious? Yes. But it's not often what we think about in the moment of immediate crisis. Colleagues, in situations of humanitarian crises, such as the one in Afghanistan, providing people with the basic necessities of life is the humane, critical, and urgent thing to do in and of itself. Also, this important reminder for our Canadian international humanitarian sector leaders is key to keep in mind at this time. For the Afghan people to be able to reclaim their lives, reclaim their rights, and reclaim their country, and to protect and build on some of the gains they had previously made, they will need to be strong and resilient. Colleagues, we know that Canada has been providing some humanitarian assistance to Afghans since the Taliban retook the country almost 2 years ago. But that has been through international organizations and not through our own robust sector. With the passing of Bill C-41, Canadian organizations will be able to ramp up their humanitarian machinery, engage Canadians who want to join in supporting the effort to respond to the humanitarian crisis, and immediately help more Afghans with more resources. This important support will help Afghans weather these difficult times. I hope it will help Bibi Gul and the hundreds and thousands of women and men who are working hard to create their own sustainable livelihoods. And honourable senators, it's my hope that opening the tap on this important support will help Afghans like Bibi rebuild their strength for the next stages of their fight for peace, human rights, social and economic development, and democracy. Colleagues, let's not tarry. Honourable senators, let's move this common sense bill forward to assist Afghan people today and others in the future who may find themselves in similar states of crisis in other places. Manana, Tashakor, thank you.